Now that we have the idea for our subclass, today we're going to be looking closer at the Artificer and Toymakers.
Welcome to Forge Friday. Man, that intro keeps getting better.
It really gets good. My God.
Welcome to Forge Fridays, everybody. We're going to be going over the rest of our Artificer class that we were making with you all, the community.
And I really want to quickly say we actually got a lot of great feedback on that last video, so thank you everybody for commenting and giving us some really good ideas. And today we're going to be kind of going over kind of the progression and the breakdown of actually creating an Artificer class. Again, kind of a new venture for us as it's a new class in general. We never actually tried to build a subclass for the Artificer, so it was a lot of interesting research, to say the least.
That's right. Now, we had to go back and look through the Artificer class as a whole with that and see what they actually do with it. And we touched on this in other videos too. Yeah. We know that they're there to support the party above everything else. They don't really get a lot of blasty abilities.
Not a whole lot.
It's based in their subclass. But the reason why we had to look at it is you have to look at what they gain for their Artificer levels.
Yeah, so kind of typical. It's a 3, 5, 9, 15 progression. And it's kind of interesting with this because the Artificer, yes, it does get things at that increment, but also the big focus with the Artificer is going to be those infusions and those replicable magic items, which is kind of going to be a big chunk of what the Toymaker is going to be too.
Right. So when we were thinking about the Toymaker stuff, we were looking at it and going, okay, so really what they're doing is they're making the actual toys, the actual magic items.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So instead of, I'm going to infuse the shield and make it +2, we're having them craft the magic items like they would if you were to select those in basic infusions.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So just that mechanic alone, the core mechanic of that class is going to be a huge consideration when we actually start making the mechanics. So we kind of had to take all that into consideration. So that being said, when we're actually looking at Toymakers, there was a lot of interesting research there too. We kind of found like a lot of interesting, lore and different cultures as to how they define Toymakers or like stories that they've had in their past.
Right. And it brought us down a lot of rabbit holes with it.
It did, yes, yeah.
Different types of toys. What types of toys were there in medieval times? Were you talking like corn husk dolls? Were you talking,
right.
There was so much there. And we found some really great resources and we did some good research on it with it. And we found, I think wood was the thing that we wanted to concentrate on.
We really wanted to find a focus for the type of toys that were available. We didn't want to get anything too modern. Like we didn't want them, anything flashing lights or anything electronic really. We really wanted to keep it grounded to kind of like a medieval Victorian age. And that's actually where a lot of the research was rotating around. So we actually were able to narrow it down to that range because believe it or not, in the medieval times they didn't have a ton of toys, so that's why we kind of had to expand a little bit, but the toys are kind of roughly around the same times.
Yeah, you used what you had.
Yeah, so really, pretty much.
There's an onion head doll.
Right, yeah, and you kind of had to go with it.
But, some of that stuff that I really liked about it, and you and I were talking with it, is when we're looking at those toys, because we even threw out the idea of a jack-in-the-box. We thought it was too mechanical for what we were trying to do. Right.
And it's funny because we even saw a couple of examples of, like a jack-in-the-box or other things that were like kind of mechanical. But we really kind of wanted to take it even further and way more simpler and allow the Toymaker to kind of take that mundane item and really make it flourish.
Right. So what are we doing with toys? So we listed out a few of them. We've got a whole list. We're just going to go over a few with it too. But we thought about blocks. We thought about wooden tops, the little hobby horses there that you can ride on, yo-yos, jacks, dolls, all sorts of different medieval toys.
And when we started listing out the toys, we had to start thinking about, how children might actually play with the toys. So the blocks are a really good example because, logistically speaking, blocks were used typically to, build maybe little buildings or build walls or castles or things like that. And, of course, these blocks could possibly tumble over. So that actually kind of had a lot of reasoning as to how we were kind of thinking about how we could use blocks as a possible game mechanic.
And from that, it actually determined where we wanted to have the toys have a minor effect and the toys have a major effect.
Yeah, exactly. Again, Toymakers are there to kind of help children, explore their imagination and things like that. And of course, some children happen to be more imaginative than others. So that's how we kind of were able to think of this idea, like maybe, like you give a player something like, oh, it's a toy, But if they're willing to believe or, finding a way to turn that into a game mechanic, it could essentially increase the buffing effect of that toy.
Right. So let's take blocks, for example.
Yeah, blocks are a good example.
We talked about blocks, and when we thought of blocks, we thought of, something solid, some building, something.
Right, right, exactly. So initially the idea was that, the Toymaker can maybe build a couple blocks and, maybe they're really big and they can provide some cover.
Right. Yeah. And we tossed it back and forth and thought, okay, cover is sort of a thing that would be good additionally with it, right? Mm-hmm. And then we looked at it and went, okay, so maybe you just set up the blocks, and what normally happens with blocks is somebody comes and knocks them down.
Right, exactly.
Right? So the blocks themselves would have the idea that they can provide partial cover, but then they can also be knocked over. So they don't necessarily have like a 1 AC or something.
Yeah,
something.
Yeah.
And on your turn, you can hit them. And they can go flying towards, the 5 feet in front of them.
Yeah. Or, of course, if an enemy is able to damage through them, they could potentially hurt your ally as well. So it's kind of like a give and take.
Right.
Make sure it's balanced.
Yeah, it was kind of just the idea of like, okay, whichever ally you give it to, they set it up. And then that's what that particular magic item does.
Basically.
But we would do that on a one turn or one time basis.
Yeah, exactly. We started thinking about considering that the Artificer already gets so many infusions and so many of these items that they can actually replicate. We didn't want to really add a whole other thing where they have to keep track of the infusions and the magic items and then all these toys. A lot of these are probably going to be like one-time use. You use it and then it's going to be done for that time.
Yeah, for that next day or whatever way.
Whatever it is.
The hobby horse, I thought was really cool.
Which we had to research the name because I was like, we called it horse on a stick for a while in our notes, but we finally found it was a hobby horse.
Yeah, that's right. So what about the horse on a stick?
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't that have a name? So we looked it up. It's a hobby horse. That kind of works. So we thought first, for the minor ability, it could cause a little increased movement.
Right.
You get on the thing, you ride away.
Yeah, you're like, as a child, you're like, oh, I'm riding a horse now, so you're faster. So like we haven't decided, maybe like 10, 15 feet, whatever. We'll think about that later.
Yeah, but if you really believe in it, then you're not just riding a stick horse. You're a knight.
Exactly. So we got into this idea, like if you really believe in it, you have the boosted movement, but then you can also do the charge ability, which is already an existing thing in D&D. So that was actually really convenient.
Right. So that worked out pretty well. And there's so many different ones that we've put up. We don't want to go over all of them because we want you guys to be surprised in that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the doll is another one.
Speaking of surprise.
And this one was a point of contention for a while.
And it actually really got us thinking about how to introduce possible alignment options in creating a class. But essentially with the doll, I think we had like a split decision. Initially, you had this idea where the doll, like, you'd imagine like, oh, you hold it, you feel comforted, it could take a hit for you.
Right. But when we really looked at it too, the imagination that a little girl or a little boy puts into a doll is, okay, yeah, you have the doll and you play with it. But the personality and the stuff that comes out of it, I know kids who name their dolls that their dolls talk back to them. Yeah. Like, you have to talk to the doll instead of the girl or what have you.
Right.
So it can have many different ways that go about that.
And it goes back into our research portion where there are, kind of naughty toy makers. Like in the last episode, we mentioned the toy maker from Batman, Jigsaw. There's actually a creepypasta of a toy maker in there too. So there are a lot of bad examples of toy makers. So this, we kind of started to think of this other idea where like maybe the doll is this, it's an item that you put down and it starts gibbering and jabbering and acts as a distraction. And if someone tries to attack a player that maybe was gifted the doll, like it could have like a sanctuary effect. Where if they try to attack the player, wisdom save. If they fail, they got to attack the doll. And it even got further than that, where if they really believe in the doll, it could act as a pretty weak familiar, but it can attack, use the help action, do other stuff like that.
Right. So, giving other classes or different people in your party that option to have that familiar. And it really got us thinking about how to split up what the toy does based on the alignment of the person you gave it to, rather than the artificer themselves.
Because we want to make sure that a player who wanted to be the toy maker, they could be good or bad. We kind of want to make sure that's a blanket thing. And something with the toy maker, it seems like it's initially difficult. Normally you would think of like this like cheerful person, but we really wanted to make sure that we gave the option for good and evil players. So we started thinking about, if your alignment is good, maybe the toy does this. If your alignment is evil, maybe the toy does this. And that would apply to either the toy maker or the person that is under the effect of said toy.
Right. So, we've gone over a lot of different ideas with it as we went through this. And believe me, there is a list of toys that goes down this
quite a lot.
thing. And, for everything from wooden play swords to, to blown up balls to even just a pig's bladder balloon.
Yeah, exactly.
Things like that. But we're really interested in seeing what you guys would like to see the Toymaker actually make. Are there any medieval toys that you would like to see in this release? We'll obviously come up with some creative things for that toy, but we're very interested in what you guys have to say.
Yeah, so if you have any ideas, be sure to leave the comment down below. We're always there to read your responses and things like that. And also, not to mention, we still need some artwork for this awesome Toymaker class. Go off of the things that we've said, go off of what other people have said for inspiration. You can actually send that artwork to HBCForgeFridays@gmail.com. We'll leave the email down below if you do need to send anything in. And remember, if you actually do submit it and it gets picked, you will be participating in that whole publishing experience as well.
That's right. And remember, toys don't kill people. People with toys kill people. So until next time,
keep brewing.